Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. Let's talk about a name you think you know, Mary Magdalene. For 2,000 years she has been cast in a very specific role, the penitent sinner, the woman weeping at Jesus' feet, a supporting character in a story dominated by men. But what if that is not just an incomplete picture, but a deliberate deception? What if the woman we know as a humble follower was actually and what if the proof of this was written down, cherished by early believers, and then violently suppressed, buried in the desert sands for nearly 19 centuries, waiting for someone to uncover the truth? This isn't just a story about a forgotten manuscript. It is the story of a power struggle for the very soul of a new faith, a conflict that pitted the institution against enlightenment, and a man who would become the rock of the church. We're about to open a book that was never meant to be read and listen to a voice that was intentionally silenced. This is the story of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. The year is 1896. The setting is not a grand European library or a university, but the dusty, chaotic antiquities market of Cairo, Egypt. A German scholar named Karl Reinhardt is navigating the crowded stalls, his eyes a codex, an ancient style book bound in papyrus. It's unassuming, its pages brittle with age. Most would have passed it by, but Reinhardt senses something more. He purchases the manuscript and takes it back to Berlin. But the scholarly world moves slowly, and a combination of academic hurdles and 2 world wars means this incredible find sits, largely because this codex contains several texts, one of which is titled, simply, The Gospel of Mary. The very existence of such a document is an earthquake, but the real shock is what's inside, and what's missing. The manuscript is tragically incomplete. The first 6 pages are gone. A 4-page chunk from the middle is also ripped from history. It is like finding a map to a hidden kingdom, but it drops us right into the middle of a scene of profound grief and confusion. It's just after the crucifixion. The disciples are gathered in a room, huddled together not in faith, but in fear. The man they called the Savior is gone. They are terrified that his fate will soon be theirs. The text describes them as weeping and grieving greatly. Their leader is dead, their hope is extinguished, and they are lost. Into this despair steps Mary. She doesn't weep. She doesn't grieve in the same way. Instead, she comforts them. She turns their hearts toward the good and begins to speak. And this is the first clue that something is radically different here. Mary is the one taking charge. She is the spiritual anchor in a storm of doubt. She reminds them of Jesus' words, his constant presence, and she stills their fear. And his words reveal everything about her status in this inner circle. He says, "Sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than the rest of women. Tell us the words of the Savior which you remember, which you know, but we do not, nor have we heard them." Think about that statement. It's a stunning admission. Peter, the future rock of the church, is openly acknowledging 2 things. First, that Jesus had a unique and preferential, and second, that Jesus gave her teachings in private, secrets that he and the other male disciples were not privy to. The stage is set. Peter has asked her to fill the void, to reveal the hidden knowledge, and Mary accepts. She begins to recount a vision, a conversation she had with the resurrected Christ, a revelation given to her alone. She describes a dialogue not about faith or morality in the way What she reveals is not a simple parable. It is a complex, mystical, and deeply philosophical teaching. It's a roadmap for the soul to escape the prison of material existence and ascend back to its divine home. She explains that sin as a concept doesn't really exist. She says, "There is no sin, but it is you who make sin when you do the things that are like the nature of adultery. Sin isn't an external law you break, but an internal state of being, a consequence of being bound to material nature, to passions and attachments. Salvation, therefore, isn't about being forgiven for breaking rules. It is about achieving spiritual liberation from the material world itself. It is about knowledge, or gnosis in Greek. It's about understanding your true nature and your true home." Then it begins an ascent, a cosmic journey upward through a series of hostile realms, each guarded by a powerful, malevolent entity. The text says the soul must face 4 fundamental powers on its journey. These aren't demons with pitchforks. They are personifications of the very forces that chain us to illusion and suffering in this life. The first power the soul meets is darkness. The second is desire. The third is ignorance. Each of these powers interrogates the soul. They act as cosmic border guards, trying to trap it, to drag it back down into the cycle of reincarnation and material existence. They challenge the soul, asking, "Where are you from, manslayer, and where are you going, space conqueror?" A soul without knowledge, a soul still attached to the world, would be trapped. It would be judged, found wanting, and thrown back into the dark. It knows how to dismantle these cosmic jailers. It speaks the password. To the first power, the soul declares, "What binds me has been slain, and what surrounds me has been overcome." To the second, "My desire has been ended, and my ignorance has died." The soul announces its freedom from the very things that constitute the material world. It's not just passing a test, it is demonstrating its... Mary describes how, as the soul vanquishes each power, it ascends higher, freer, until finally it achieves what the text calls the repose of silence. It has escaped the noisy, chaotic prison of the material universe and returned to its true source, the silent, undifferentiated reality of the divine. This is the secret teaching Jesus gave to Mary. It is a profound... She has delivered a revelation that is completely unlike anything the other disciples had ever heard. And that silence is broken by anger. The first to speak is Andrew, Peter's brother. His reaction is one of pure disbelief. He says, "Say what you will about what she has said, but I do not believe that the Savior said this, for certainly these teachings are strange ideas." He voices the skepticism of the traditionalist. This complex metaphysical journey of the soul feels alien. Andrew represents the resistance of simple doctrine against complex esoteric wisdom. He's not malicious, just bewildered. He can't reconcile this new information with his existing framework. But then Peter speaks, and his objection is not just theological. It is deeply personal, laced with jealousy and a raw challenge to authority. He stands up, his voice filled with... He sneers. Did he really speak with a woman in private and not openly to us? Are we to turn around and all listen to her? Did he prefer her to us? This is the heart of the conflict laid bare. This is not a debate about ideas. This is a power play. Peter's questions are drenched in wounded pride. He who was supposed to be the leader, the one Jesus nicknamed the Rock, cannot accept that the Savior would give his most profound... The phrase, "Did he prefer her to us?" is the cry of an ego that feels threatened. It is a question of hierarchy, of status, of gender. In Peter's world, knowledge and authority flow through men. The idea of a woman being the primary recipient of divine revelation is not just strange, as it was for Andrew, it is offensive. It undermines his entire worldview, and more importantly, his perceived position. The tension in the room must have been unbearable. The woman who had just comforted them, who had shared a vision of cosmic hope, is now being publicly attacked and humiliated by the group's de facto leader. At this moment, Mary breaks down. The text says she wept and said to Peter, "My brother Peter, what do you think? Do you think that I have thought this up myself in my heart, or that I am lying about the Savior?" Her strength has been... She is now isolated, her profound spiritual experience dismissed as female hysteria or a deceitful power grab. This is the primal schism of the early church, happening right here in this grieving room. It's a battle between two competing visions of Christianity. Peter's vision is one of structure, of a clear line of authority passed down from Jesus to the male apostles. It's a public, exoteric faith. Mary's vision, informed by the Gnostic revelation, is one of inner experience, of secret knowledge passed directly from the divine to the individual soul, regardless of gender. One is the path of the institution, the other is the path of the mystic. And in this moment, the institution is trying to crush the mystic. If you are finding this story of a hidden history as compelling as I do, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. To understand the depth of Peter's attack, we have to unravel 2,000 years of misinformation about Mary Magdalene herself. For most of Christian history, she has been known by a single damning label: the prostitute, the repentant whore who washed Jesus' feet with her tears and was redeemed. It's a powerful story, but it's a fiction. It's a lie that was constructed centuries after her death. The Bible never ever... We can trace it back to a single sermon given in the year 591 by Pope Gregory the Great. In this sermon, Gregory conflated three separate women from the Gospels into one composite character. He took Mary of Magdala, from whom Jesus cast out 7 demons, Mary of Bethany, the sister of Lazarus and Martha, and the unnamed sinful woman who anoints Jesus' feet in the Gospel of Luke. He blended them together and declared them to be one and the same person, the penitent prostitute, Mary Magdalene. Why did he do this? We can't know his exact motives, but the result was catastrophic for Mary's legacy. It transformed a prominent, powerful female leader into a cautionary tale about female sexuality and the need for male-led redemption. It was an act of character assassination that stuck for over 4. It was only in 1969 that the Catholic Church officially corrected this, admitting that there was no biblical basis for identifying Mary Magdalene as the sinful woman. But by then, the damage was done. The image was cemented in art, literature, and the popular imagination. So, if she wasn't the prostitute, who was she? Let's look at what the canonical Gospels, the ones that made it into the Bible. She is consistently listed as a leader among the women who followed and, crucially, financially supported Jesus' ministry. This wasn't just a tag. Along, she was a patron, a woman of means who was central to the movement's survival. Most importantly, she is present at the 2 most critical events in Christianity. She is at the foot of the cross, while most of the male disciples, including Peter, had fled in terror, and she is the first person to whom the resurrected Jesus appears. This is undisputed across all 4 Gospels. He appears to her first, alone. He gives her a message and commissions her to go and tell the male disciples the news. He makes her the very first evangelist. This is why, in some early Christian traditions, she was given a title of immense honor, Apostle to the Apostles. She was the one sent to. Yet even in the canonical Gospels, there is a hint of the conflict we see in the Gospel of Mary. In the Gospel of John, when she rushes to tell the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," their reaction is disbelief. Luke's Gospel is even more blunt, stating that when the women told the apostles, their words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. The seed of the Gospel of Mary simply pulls back the curtain and shows us the full-blown argument that resulted from that seed. But the Gospel of Mary is not a lone voice crying in the wilderness. Other texts, also branded as heresy and buried, echo its high praise for her. In the Gospel of Philip, another text discovered in the 20th century at Nag Hammadi in Egypt, the relationship between Jesus and Mary is described. But Christ loved her more than all the disciples and used to kiss her often on her mouth. The rest of the disciples were offended by it and expressed disapproval. They said to him, "Why do you love her more than all of us?" There it is again. The same sentiment we see in Peter's outburst, the jealousy of the male disciples and the clear preference Jesus showed for Mary, that word companion in Coptic, the language of the manuscript. While sensationalized, most scholars believe this was symbolic in Gnostic thought. The mouth was the source of breath and speech, so a kiss was a way of passing spiritual knowledge, the breath of wisdom directly from master to a worthy disciple. It symbolized the transmission of gnosis. In another Gnostic text, the Pistis Sophia, Mary is again the star pupil. She asks Jesus more questions and receives more praise for her spiritual insight than any other disciple, including Peter, who at one point gets frustrated and complains that Mary is dominating the conversation and not letting the men speak. Jesus gently rebukes him. Time and time again, in these texts that were suppressed, we see the same pattern. Mary is the enlightened disciple. Peter is the one who represents the institution, the literalist who is often confused and quick to anger. These weren't just alternative gospels, they were presenting an alternative power structure. They were championing a form of Christianity where spiritual authority came from direct, personal enlightenment, not from institutional appointment. And in that model, Mary Magdalene was the supreme example. Not a repentant sinner, but a respected leader, a financial pillar of the movement, the first witness to the resurrection, and in the eyes of many, the keeper of the Savior's most sacred secrets. His attack wasn't just an outburst of temper, it was a preemptive strike against a rival for the leadership of the fledgling church. Let's return to that shattered room. Mary is weeping, Peter is fuming, and then another disciple steps forward. His name is Levi, often identified with the Apostle Matthew. He doesn't side with Andrew's disbelief, and he certainly doesn't side with Peter's jealous rage. Instead, he rebukes Peter directly. The text says Levi turned to Peter and said, "Peter, you have always been hot-tempered. Now I see you contending against the woman like the adversaries. If the Savior made her worthy..." This is a stunning moment. Someone is finally standing up to Peter. Levi's defense is logical and powerful. First, he calls Peter out on his well-known anger issues. Then he reframes the entire argument. The issue isn't whether Mary is telling the truth. The issue is whether they trust Jesus' judgment. If the Savior made her worthy, who are you to reject her? It's a direct challenge to Peter's arrogance. He is putting his own that is why he loved her more than us. He not only confirms Peter's greatest fear, that Jesus preferred her, but he states it as a fact, as the very reason for her special revelation. He is telling Peter to accept it, to humble himself before the clear choice the Savior made. After Levi speaks, the tension seems to break. The text says they began to go out to teach and to preach. Levi's intervention, but we know from history that this was only a temporary victory. The argument may have ended in that room, but it would rage across the Christian world for the next 300 years. This scene in the Gospel of Mary is a microcosm of a much larger war of ideas, a battle for the future of Christianity. On one side were the Gnostic Christians, who believed in these secret teachings, in personal revelation, and who, on the other side, were what we might call the proto-Orthodox Christians, the faction that gathered around the authority of Peter and the other apostles. They emphasized a unified church structure, a specific set of beliefs, a creed, and a canon of approved scriptures. For them, authority wasn't based on personal visions, it was based on apostolic succession, a direct line of command from Jesus to Peter. In this battle, a gospel that showed Peter being ignorant, jealous, and rightly rebuked for challenging a woman with superior spiritual knowledge, was more than just an embarrassment. It was a direct threat to the entire foundation of their authority. It was ideological dynamite for the church to survive and grow as a powerful, unified institution. This alternative vision had to be eliminated. And in the 2nd century, influential church fathers like Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyon, began to write polemics against the Gnostics. He wrote a massive work called Against Heresies, where he declared their beliefs to be dangerous, deluded, and evil. He laid out what was acceptable to believe and what was not. And he established a canon of only 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All other Gospels. As the Roman Empire eventually adopted Christianity, this theological disagreement acquired the force of law. Heresy became a crime against the state. In the 4th century, after the Emperor Constantine converted, church councils like the Council of Nicaea were convened to standardize Christian doctrine once and for all. What followed was a systematic campaign of suppression. Gnostic texts were hunted down and burned. To be caught with a book like the Gospel of Mary was to risk excommunication, imprisonment, or even death. It was a war of information, and the proto-Orthodox side had the power of the empire behind them. They were incredibly successful. For over 1,500 years, the Gnostics were known only through the writings of their enemies. Their own voices were silenced, their scriptures believed to be lost forever. The Christianity that survived and flourished was the Christianity of Peter, hierarchical, institutional, and patriarchal. The Christianity of Mary Magdalene, mystical, individual, and egalitarian, was driven underground and effectively erased from history. It became a ghost, a whisper of a what-if. It's only by a series of miracles that we have these texts. They survived because brave, anonymous monks and believers, seeing the tide of history turning against them, hid their sacred books in jars and buried them in the desert. They entombed their beliefs, hoping that a future generation might one day find them. The Berlin Codex, containing the Gospel of Mary, was one such discovery. An even larger discovery was made in 1945 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, where a farmer stumbled upon a sealed jar containing a whole library of 13 codices with over 50 different texts, including the Gospels of Thomas and Philip. These discoveries were like finding a time capsule from the losing side of a great war for the first time. We could hear the Gnostics speak in their own words, and what they tell us. There wasn't one Christianity, there were many Christianities, all competing for followers, and the version that won was not necessarily the one that was most true or most authentic. It was the one that was best organized, best financed, and ultimately best backed by political power. The Gospel of Mary is the most poignant evidence of this lost world. The very state of the manuscript, fragmented with its beginning and end missing, we are dropped into the middle of her life and left to guess at her origins and her ultimate fate. What was on those missing first 6 pages? Was it Mary's own account of her time with Jesus? A description of how he cast the 7 demons out of her, perhaps revealing that these